September 25th, it says June, September 25th Historic Preservation Commission meeting. The commission's here tonight to work together with all of you, property owners, neighbors, and architects to continue the tradition that was established nearly 40 years ago in this community. That tradition is a review process that allows community members to work together to preserve the qualities and unique character that make Lake Forest a special community. City of Lake Forest is committed to conducting open and democratic meetings. To achieve that goal, meeting procedures have been adopted by the commission, and a copy of the procedures is available at the back of the room on each agenda. As always, it's the intent of the commission to help manage the development and growth of the city of Lake Forest with a keen sense of preserving the historic structures and open space in the city for all its present and future residents. And our goal is to move each petition before us tonight through the review process as quickly as possible while balancing the interests of the petitioners, neighboring property owners, and the larger community. So we'll start this evening, as we always do, with an introduction of the commissioners.
I'm John Travers.
I'm Bill Ransom.
Kirk Pairitz.
Mary Ellen Swenson.
Jim Preschlack.
Robert Alfe.
Thanks, folks. And we have, I think, a set of meeting minutes from maybe our April meeting. Is that correct?
April 24th.
Thank you. That has been submitted in a draft form. Commissioners have had a chance to look at those. Are there any comments, or are there any commissioners that would like more time to review those before we act on those this evening?
I had one comment on page 6, final paragraph, starting on the page. There's a typo. It should be corrected from for form.
Yeah, I have nothing.
Anybody else? All right, I'll ask if there's a motion to approve those minutes.
I'd move to approve the April 24th minutes with the proposed change of Commissioner Travers.
Thanks. The motion's been made by Commissioner Ransom. Is there a second? And seconded by Commissioner Preschlack. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And so that passes. Thank you. And we have our first petition. It's a returning petition. This is a continued consideration for a request for Certificate of Appropriateness approving alterations to a garden wall and incorporation of a breezeway and mudroom at 885 Maplewood Road. We saw this a while ago. I think most of these commissioners might have been for that meeting, but I'll ask just in case if anybody has a conflict with this. And I see none, so come on up and remind us what we were looking at. Thanks.
All right, my name is Austin DePree. I'm representing Troy and Michele. I was actually here at the last meeting, but not representing them as their architect, but I've been recently engaged with Troy and Michele to kind of take a fresh look at this problem. As most of you remember from the last meeting, there was a series of issues with trying to adapt an enclosed breezeway to an existing curvilinear wall that had been a 2002 addition to this beautiful 1924 Stanley Anderson. So again, Troy and Michele hired us to really take a fresh look at this problem and see if we could come up with a solution that would work. So again, as the commission's aware, just a street view from Maplewood, a garage addition that was built in 2002 with this curved garden wall connecting to the existing front facade of the residence. A rear view, again, of the original home, and then the addition to the left here. This is a view from the interior courtyard, just giving you a little bit more flavor of the existing architecture and vernacular of the home. More views from the rear. Views from the street with a 7-foot wall surrounding the property. This language of the brick wall is a theme that runs throughout the property, and we've really chosen this as a starting point for the new design. Again, just some neighborhood context of surrounding homes. So this is the existing plan, and again, from an aerial perspective, just looking at the addition from 2002, and the dark poche represents the original house. This curved line here is a garden wall that steps and comes in flush with that front facade, the front entry door. So the proposed solution that we're looking at in site plan is to demolish this curved garden wall. And in our eyes, it really was the one curvilinear wall in the whole project. And again, taking a step back, we thought we would look at the more rectilinear orthogonal nature of the original design of garden walls and courtyards and try to follow that as a guiding principle. We have worked more extensively with Troy and Michele, not only on this specific problem of how to connect the garage and the home, but then enhancing the landscape and developing a landscape plan that would connect this garden wall with the home and with the rest of the property. So I'll let Troy stand up at the end. He's been working on this very closely with his wife and another noted landscape architect in the community. But I think as you'll see as we get into a larger scale plan, the garden wall that we've planned and then the future landscape improvements at the rear of the home will really help enhance this axial symmetry through the center of the home. It extends from the existing courtyard out into the rear yard. This is a blow-up of the plan. Programmatically, I think this was described to you at the last meeting, that the primary need that is being addressed here is a connection of this two-story garage to the home. The kitchen in this house is actually on the east side of the house. The garage is on the far west facade. So really the problem that we're trying to solve is to create a mudroom rear entry hall for the family, conditioned space, and at the same time trying to resolve some architectural inconsistencies at the front facade. The proposed elevation, you can see the existing home here, and what we've done is taken cues again from this language of the garden wall and these paneled arch doors and created a new doorway, but really tried to create an element that looks much more like a garden wall. It doesn't look like an extension of the home. We're not introducing any glazing, any windows that compete with any of the proportions and massing that's been established by the original home. So I think when Troy, Michele, and I were working on this, we really came at it with the idea that we were going to do something that was very subdued, that did not detract from the original facade. And actually, we're feeling that this solution and actually taking that curvilinear wall away actually puts more focus on the original facade. From the rear, as you recall from the photograph, there was a existing pergola that exists on the back of the garage. And what we've done again is picking up on the language of these walls and existing fenestration around the house. We've tried to create this orthogonal line relative to the existing house to continue that language of courtyards and garden walls. Again, the two other elevations, the existing garage, taking away this curved wall and the standalone column. We're trying to simplify the garage and again make it subservient to the existing home. So from a perspective view, this is again coming in from the road and looking at the existing conditions of this curved wall that seems to peel away from the garage and then connect flush to the existing facade. We're proposing to set this wall back again orthogonal to the existing structure, and taking that peeling, curving wall away and just making this a very simple garage. And from the rear, trying to continue the language that you find around the rest of the house, with this garden wall punctuated by windows and doors that are sympathetic to the existing house. On here you can see the garden that does not exist right now. The landscape, there's not a very strong connection between the rear yard and the house right now. And what we're trying to do as part of this project is create that balance and symmetry to highlight this existing bay window. So with that, I might let Troy just say a few words, since he's been through this process for a
Sure.
long time now.
Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. How are we getting back and forth here? Just roll the button. I'm just going to focus on the landscape plan. All right, I've got the expert in architecture, and we feel like we've come to a really wonderful solution from our perspective that's highly sympathetic to the home, which is our goal. And we've already done a lot of work in restoring the main part of the house, and this is really just an extension of that in our mind. We are a gardening family, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with my mother-in-law, Lorna Marsh, Miles and Lorna Marsh of Lake Forest. She is a noted gardener here in this town. Her property is at 965 East Deerpath. Her home is on tour frequently. It's been visited by the National Trust, by the Botanic Garden on an annual basis. I mean, probably about 10 garden walks a year go through her property. It's stunning. But my mother-in-law, Lorna, and I collaborated on this plan that Austin started to show you this evening. So if we roll back to, I'm going to go back to the overhead shot very quickly, just to orient you a bit. There it is. It's a little bit of a long haul here, scale-wise, but this was designed to create a number of kind of important access points as well as kind of views from the house. So we introduced the kind of traditional European parterres on either side, using boxwood and roses, but with a fresher kind of design element, not getting too French in its execution, but being kind of referring to it very heavily. We also set it from the house by walkways that access the door into the breezeway as well as into the side garden over on this end, so that you have a clear way to move through this space, but you can also view this garden up here directly from the dining room windows, and this garden from the screen and porch as well as from the master windows. There is symmetry here, but you see it extends out and kind of rolls and kind of slowly sets back until you get to this side garden here. We felt this house isn't exactly symmetrical. It provides a lot of romance. It kind of falls away from the center. So the garden design was intended to do that as well. The side garden on this end is actually intended to be a formal European garden. We have a border garden on this end with perennials. On this side, we have a heavy planting of hydrangeas, azaleas, hostas, ferns, underplanted with daffodils. This has all been installed since we've been in. And then there's a yew hedge that runs along the side here. Fortunately, we were left with 2 original gates to the property, and they are not currently in use. One of those gates will be installed here. It is a short gate. It's about 3.5 feet high. And then there is a scale version of it that's 7 feet tall. And we would install that gate here to create the appropriate scale for the walled garden effect that we have here. Because we come to the wall at the end here with 7 foot of brick. And that wall at the back here is covered with espalier redbud trees, and over on this side we are covered with espalier pear trees, which really helps manage the sunshine and what kinds of plants will flourish in those spaces. So that gives you just a sense of kind of how we came at what this garden experience will be like. We feel it's fresh, but it's very European in orientation. It feels like it connects with the house, and really serves a number of needs in terms of how we interact with the backyard, which is largely inaccessible today. because the only way to get to the backyard is to go through the living room, which is not the best way to access that when you've got kids and a dog, right? So as Austin showed you, we get to the back here, and we think it really comes together. And you can see the parterres here, the espalier pear trees. We add pots here with large tree-form lilacs, and again, the parterre on this side as well. So we hope that gives you a flavor of where we intend to take all this.
Terrific, thank you. All right, do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Chairman. As was noted, this petition was continued from the June meeting. At that time, the Commission was generally supportive of some connection in this area, but really asked the petitioner to explore the relationship of solids to voids, of how that mass is articulated, and also look at how the addition interfaces with the existing historic house and the garage. The petitioner has spent the last couple months studying several different options. I know they're not all presented to you this evening, but this is the preferred plan that's put forth to you tonight. Hopefully the commissioners have all had an opportunity to walk the property and experience the intimacy of the rear yard and how the garden walls do influence the character of this property. That theme is really what's directing the design of the project that's before you this evening. Some positives that occur with this project are the reestablishment of the original corner of that front entrance facade by pulling the curved wall off the property and reinstating a straight wall from the main house. You can actually see the articulation of the mass as it was originally envisioned. The mass of the garden wall is also pushed back on the property, so it's not as perceived from the front property line. This request also requires a building scale variance. This is a unique request. It is a request for an addition that is visible from the front facade. There are findings in your staff report to support the building scale variance. I think in general, the pushing back of that mass of the garden wall really does help reduce and minimize the mass of the brick wall in that area. And there already is a substantial connection between those two structures. You do have at your place this evening a letter from the Historic Preservation Foundation. We have not received any new correspondence from the surrounding property owners, but if you recall at the last meeting there was some correspondence mainly regarding construction activity for this property, which we can handle when this project goes through the permitting process. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. So now is an opportunity for commissioners to ask any questions they may have of the staff or the petitioner, if there are any questions.
I had one question. I noted that in effect, for purposes of the building scale variance calculation, the deemed size of the site is reduced to take account of the fact that some of the site is not flat. And I was wondering if you could remind me how that is done.
The building scale ordinance does have some specifications about lot size, which is the determining factor for the maximum allowable bulk on a property. The ordinance requires 100% of table land to be counted and 50% of non-table land. Non-table land being property that has a slope of more than 10%.
So if I had my HP 12C with me, I could probably figure out what the table land is and what the non-table land is, but could you tell me what it is? I'm just trying to get a feel for how big an impact this is on.
The actual lot size, and the petitioner can correct me if I'm wrong on this, is just over 38,000. I believe using that calculation, it reduces it to 35,600.
Okay, so you don't have the breakout of the table land and the non-table land?
Well, it's about 10%, right? 38 to 35,
Yeah.
more or less.
So 38 to 35, so that means 6,000 feet would be table land, then, non-table land. Is that about right?
Well, you get credit for 50% of the non-table lands.
Right. So if we start off with 38,000 feet and we wind up with 35,000 feet, then that means that we've lost 3,000 feet,
then
which
that
means that
would've
the tableland must be 6,000 feet. Thank you. Can I ask you a question again? If the non-table land was treated as 100%, I mean, just from trying to keep things clear in my own mind, would there be a building scale variance required, or would it be much reduced, a little reduced?
There's no area for tableland or non-table land shown in this, right? I'm sorry,
I think it was
there's no
accident-
reduction. It's 35,000 square feet is just shown as the lot area here. They didn't take a credit for the non-table land.
In the form that you have in front of you, that is the number that is used to determine the maximum allowable bulk. So
Okay.
that's the
They just
lot
didn't-
area.
That's
for
the
purpose-
combined, that's the
Yeah, for the
combined.
purposes of
Thank you.
calculating bulk, that is the lot area.
Got it.
They did it in another sheet and didn't put it in here.
And can I just interject too? I mean, one other thing that's unique about this property and older homes in Lake Forest with these very steeply pitched roofs are the third floor area calculation line that slices through an uninhabitable space. So that it is being penalized partially for having such a tall, steep slope roof as well as having not 100% tableland.
Didn't know that.
There's area above the roof. but-
Yeah, the 79 square feet.
I have a question about the landscaping and the planting beds in front of the wall. I don't know if you went over what's going in there. If I missed it, I apologize, but could you what's gonna be in plantings in front of it's not a wall addition, I guess, that's being proposed?
The wall currently, but when it's set back, it still looks like a wall. It's very simple, so we would probably just have, it'll be very similar to what's here. We have a very simple execution in the front of the house so that the architecture actually shines relative to the landscaping. So the plan is for matching white redbuds there. And then just an underplanting of Pachysandra, and that's simple.
Okay, and are the beds that are being proposed in a larger area than what's there now?
Yeah, because the wall sets back quite a lot, right,
Right.
relative to where the curve is now.
Yeah.
So it will set back quite a bit. We might do, add a few, boxwoods to, provide some structure in the corners or what have you, but it would be very simple in its execution.
That's all the questions I have.
Austin, can you just maybe walk us through the thought process again around when you took over the project? I think when we were talking about it, it was kind of in between a breezeway and a permanent structure, and it wasn't really trying to resolve either well. And I think you went to the permanent structure. And I just think to hear that and other options that you considered in terms of why you landed on this one would be helpful.
Sure. Well, I think for one, when we really took a step back from the existing conditions, we felt first off that this curved wall, especially when it became a full height structure, just had an overwhelming presence when you entered the property. And there really was very little you could do to minimize that effect, because as this wall curls towards you, the perception of height is so much greater than that of the front entry. So that was one thing we were dealing with. Another was just adding more windows to this facade. I think what's charming about the existing house is the fact that it is very massive and it has these small punched windows. And the more windows you add to this scheme, the more blurred this vision becomes. And I think it really detracts your eye away from what you should be looking at first glance when you peer through these gates, which is, the beautiful massing of the existing house. So our general idea was to try to create something that didn't attract your eye, something that you would maybe see after looking at the front facade for a while. So we wanted to create something that was kind of the landscape rather than of the building, if that makes sense. And any attempt to try to punctuate that wall with windows or put a roof on that wall, simply detracted from what you really want to look at, which is the original house. I don't know if that answers your question, but trying to do something very simple, subdued, of the landscape, and to minimize the scale, just making it orthogonal to the existing building. And what was mentioned earlier, preserving this line all the way down to the foundation was very important to us. And by setting that wall back, maybe if we go to the elevations, it becomes clearer. We bring that very strong vertical line back to the front facade. So that deep shadow, this is an 18-inch reveal here, I think gives much more strength to this existing gable end.
Austin, the height of the wall of the new addition, if you will, can you walk us through that? And then how's that roof transition handled? How does the roof work actually in this area?
Yes, and we've gone back and forth. We're obviously trying to keep this wall as short as possible.
Yeah.
So we were playing with the parapet wall condition, but with the parapet, you need at least 4 inches of limestone coping, 6 to 8 inches of flashing before you get to the flat roof, and then another 12 inches of structure. So instead, we're still going to propose that this be a limestone coping detail, similar to the other details that you find in the garden walls, but then there'll be a flat copper roof on top of that. So all you'll see is a small drip edge on top of the limestone, but will appear as a garden wall. You really will not perceive a roof on top of it. The height of that parapet was really established by trying to pick up on this datum over to the left of the front entry, and then also, trying to make this space as compact as possible to strengthen, the difference between the height of this coping and this coping of the new addition.
So over on the left-hand side, you've got a kind of a conventional limestone, like maybe 3 or 4 inch kind of cap, or maybe even less?
I believe it's between 3.5 and 4 inches,
Yeah.
that coping.
Yeah, so then on this side, you'd have something along that lines, plus then another copper drip edge, couple 3 inches again.
Yeah, and we could use a zinc-coated copper drip edge. It would look more like a lead-coated copper, which you can't get anymore, which would blend more with the limestone, I think, to help minimize the appearance of any kind of flashing on top of the wall.
Okay, other questions or comments for either the staff or the petitioner? All right, now's an opportunity for the public, if there's any public testimony on this subject. And is there any? Sure, come on up and tell us about it.
Hi, Jan Gibson, 59 East Franklin Place. I think you received our Lake Forest Preservation Foundation sheet, and I just wanted to add one more thing to this. It looks like a great addition and nicely done. And I talked with Paul Bergman, who has the Stanley Anderson Archives, and said, hey, do you want to add something? And he said, just the fact that to be very careful about the stonework and brickwork, as it's some of the finest that we have in Lake Forest right now. So whoever does that mortar and that work, and I know it'll be well taken care of. So anyway, it looks good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Any other public testimony? I see none, so we can deliberate if anyone has any deliberations.
Yeah, I think this is a good resolution. It actually, I think getting rid of the curved wall, and setting back the addition, de-emphasizes the garage and that curved wall, which I thought was a problem to begin with, and certainly taking away the pseudo breezeway that we were looking at before, I think is appropriate. So I like the resolution the way it is. And again, I know we're looking for building scale variance, and we're talking about 583 square feet over the maximum allowable. I think that's minimum to reach this solution. So I'm in support of the petition.
All right, very good. Any other?
Yeah, I would just second those comments, and I'm supportive of the petition.
Well, I also am supportive of the petition. I just wanted to mention that since City Council will also look at this for the record, I think it's important to note that the considerations taken into account by the Historic Preservation Commission in granting or not granting a building scale variance in this matter are again precisely those which are reviewed by the Building Review Board and are very carefully delineated for us and studied by us by city staff. And then I wanted to mention one other matter, which for me, I'm interested in the issue of when residential buildings appear overscale and when they don't. And it seems to me that perhaps one thing which mitigates the relatively small building scale variance here is that almost 3,000 square feet of land area is removed from consideration in calculating the allowable scale bulk on this site, and that's that's 4 or 5 times the variance here. So,
Thank you. Any other deliberations?
I think it's an elegant solution to this problem, and I think it's enhanced the facade. Very, very subtly done. Beautiful.
All right, well, good job on the further study of this and presentation. I think that moving the wall back is a strong move. That's very helpful. And another consideration, in addition to the points raised already to the bulk variance, is that this property is basically surrounded by a 7-foot wall, so it's really hard to see this. So good luck with that, and let's see if we have a motion from anyone.
I prepared one.
I'd love to hear it. Be good.
I move that the Commission approve a certificate of appropriateness for additions and alterations to 885 Maplewood Road, including approval of a building scale variance not to exceed 12.2% over the maximum allowable bulk, an approximate 6% increase from the existing condition, all based on the findings stated on pages 1 through 4 of the applicable report by city staff dated September 25, 2013, as well as the testimony submitted to this commission and the commission's discussion. The approval will be subject to the conditions of approval set forth in numbered paragraphs 1 and 2 on pages 4 and 5 of the staff report. And I also note that the building scale variance is subject to city council approval.
All right, the motion's been made by Commissioner Travers. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Commissioner Preschlack. All in favor say aye.
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 Is there any opposed? All right, how about that? You're off to the races. Good luck with that. All right, new petitions. This is a petition with no variance requested for consideration of a request for certificate of appropriateness approving the addition of driveway gate and pillars at 39 South Sheridan Road. And I'll ask if any of the commissioners have any conflict with this. And I see none, so I'll be interested to see what you got for us.
Okay. Megan, how do we back out of this one? Is there a keyboard?
Okay, good evening. We had presented to the HPC previously in October of last year for the renovation of the home at 39 South Sheridan, and we did receive approval on that. We also received, I'm sorry this isn't bigger, if I click on it, will it expand?
Down at the bottom right corner, maybe? Oh, right, no, maybe not.
Let's see those icons, here we go.
It's just a sliding scale.
There we go.
Oh, there you go.
So this was a prior location that was proposed, and we did receive conditional approval for that location for the entry pillars and gates. However, when it came to implementation, we realized that this is sort of a pinch point as you come through the driveway and enter the property. This is mostly natural vegetation, sort of typical buckthorn and overgrowth, as well as over here in front of the historic wall. And we found that with the gates in that location, you've already sort of entered the property and come to the open area of the yard. So those gates were left feeling more like kind of mid-yard gates as opposed to entry gates and pillars. So with that in mind, we were interested in moving those forward 20 feet. That location was chosen as there is a large oak tree here, and we need to create, at least 10 feet of separation between that to avoid the root system. So that's the 20-foot difference there. That leaves us about 26 feet from the end of the historic wall, and about 28 feet from the property line, 40 feet to the end of the driveway, and 56 feet to the edge of Sheridan Road. This is the proposed style of pillar and gate, simple post and rail, wooden gate, black iron hardware, 16-inch square brick columns, and 5 feet in height with a limestone cap. One would contain the address on a placard, and the other pillar would have an inset mailbox, which we did receive approval from the postmaster for that. This is a picture of the gate style that we're looking to install. We knew this was the right gate because it actually had the right house number in the picture. And we like the style. This is a landscape plan. Again, there's a great deal of natural vegetation on either side of this proposed location. We're looking to just add some more manicured landscaping while keeping it fairly natural looking. Plan is 2 beds of pachysandra, some simple hosta as it is a shady location, and possibly 2 hydrangea next to the pillars. This is the entry area looking north. This is sort of coming out of Ringwood. This is the neighboring entrance, and this is the north pillar. So the other one is basically hidden behind the vegetation. That's sort of as you come from the south. The south entry pillar, the north one isn't really visible yet. And here is looking directly from the west to east. North pillar and south pillar. And then looking as you enter the property. We're proposing to paint the pillars white to match the white brick of the home. And the gates would likely be painted kind of in a medium to light gray. These are some neighboring entrances. Going north on Sheridan is 30 North Sheridan with similarly scaled pillars. Those are actually illuminated. We do not propose any illumination on ours. This is 40 North Sheridan, 190 North. This one actually has a masonry wall connecting to those as well, also painted white, and with a white brick home. So that concludes our presentation.
All right, thanks. Do you mind leaving the picture up for a second? Thanks. Oh,
Of the
nope,
entrance?
Nope, the gates. There.
Oh, this one?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's not in our packets. Give me a chance
Okay.
to look at that. Is
That's
there a,
not- That's not theirs, that's the one that they modeled it after.
I understand.
Okay.
Is there a staff report, Megan, for this?
Just some brief comments. As was noted by the petitioner, the commission did grant a certificate of appropriateness for the work that's currently going on the property. Now that the addition and alteration to the existing house is well underway, the petitioner is relooking the site plan, relooking at the site plan, and when we got out to the site and looking at where those pillars sat in relationship to the front of the property and the significant trees, a revised plan was developed and is brought forward to the commission this evening. The points that the commission it would be good to provide input on are the relationship of the proposed pillars and gate to the wall that is associated with the property to the south, but portion of it is located on this property, just to make sure that that relationship is appropriate, and also comment on the design of the gate and pillars. So we are recommending approval of the project. It is set back from the street. It is consistent with other homes along Sheridan Road with respect to having a pillar identify the entrance to the property. And there are findings in the staff report to support that.
Thanks, Megan. So if we go back to the site plan really quickly, the question that Megan raises is a little hard to see in this, but it's the distance between the existing wall and the gate, which was 8 feet and is now 26 feet. And so either from a landscaping point of view or from some other point of view, is there an interest in establishing some kind of relationship there, or how do you handle that area of that specific area of the site?
There's a great deal of natural vegetation covering the entire north side of the entrance, the neighboring entrance. So it is not
There you go, that's it.
very noticeable. The south wall, much more so. There's really just grass and some landscaping in front of it. But as soon as you get here, this buckthorn and other growth makes it very hard to even see
Got it.
the north side of the entry gate or entry wall.
So the concept is not to connect the fences to the pillar, just let the natural landscaping remain in that area.
And we feel this new location does create more separation. It lets them each stand more on their own.
Okay,
I'll be honest, when I went out there, I had to look a couple times to find this wall. It's so hidden back behind, behind everything else.
any other questions for the petitioner or the
I have a couple.
staff? There you go.
First of all, no lighting's proposed on this.
Correct. We want to keep it.
When I was out there, it looked like there's a gas or electrical light fixture right next to where that north pillar is being proposed. Is that being removed? Is that being,
Removing
Okay.
is our plan for that. It's non-functional,
okay,
non-functioning.
so it's not going to be refurbished and then put and lit up right there, okay.
No.
And is there any automatic opener on the gates?
No, we're intending them to be more
Manual.
just visual and left open typically, unless they feel a need to close them
But
manually.
most of the time we see these in the open position.
Correct.
Yeah, thanks.
They're going to open in or out?
In.
Okay.
Can you go to the, I guess, the comp gate that you looked at, the white one? I was just curious how you came up with the size of the pillars and the massing of that. If you can go to the gate, the one that you kind of took inspiration from, the white one?
Sure.
Yeah, that one. I don't know if those are 4x4s or 6x6s, and just curious if you were doing it to support the mailbox or
Well, the
function
main reason for choosing the brick columns was to tie it to the home itself. The entire first floor of the home is brick, painted white. So we thought a brick pillar would help orient this with the house, as well as painting it the same color as the house.
But in terms of the 16 inches,
That is a brick a full brick and then, well, it's 2 full bricks basically. So that would, going down in size seemed too weak to support the gates visually. And then as far as the height goes, we did pull these down from a taller pillar per staff's recommendation, and I think this scale works better with the home, as well as needing enough height for the pillar to be taller than the gate and the angle brace.
So if you were going to continue to use brick and reduce the scale, what would you have to do and how would it compromise?
You could remove half a brick and do a brick and a half per side, which would reduce it by about 4 inches and make them about 12 inches square.
And that would still give you an opportunity to hang the mailbox there and the sign that you'd like, or?
I don't think the mailbox would fit inside of that size pillar. I will go back to the neighboring. I mean, these are probably closer to 20 inches square. They're a little shorter, I would say, maybe 4 feet. These look to be roughly what we're proposing. Yeah, this would be a similar
And how about
size.
this, how about the spacing, if you can compare the spacing to the examples you're showing versus these, this actually looks like they're a little closer together in this application. What's the spacing of these?
The gates are 14 feet wide.
14 feet?
So-
actually pretty similar to the other ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say
Okay.
so.
Any other questions for the petitioner or the staff? Nice. Oh,
Does
go
it
ahead.
grade, just the color choice of the gate, just, does that match any trim or something that you're planning? Or?
Well, if we paint the front doors, we're not certain whether they'll be painted or stained. So if we paint them, we'll tie that into the gate color.
Thank you.
All right, now's an opportunity for the public if there's any comment on this issue. And I see none, so we can deliberate. You choose. I'm not too wound up about this one myself. I think that the gates are, satisfactorily back from the road. I like the fact that they'll be open a lot. I think that's nicer than looking at the closed gates, frankly, and consistent with some of the other neighborhood properties. The scale of it doesn't really upset me, given the location of these and how they're kind of buried with the landscaping, so I'm fine with it. And ask if anybody else has any comments they want to share. Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion.
I have a motion.
I love it.
I move that the commission approve a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of 2 non-illuminated pillars and wooden gate at 39 South Sheridan Road, based on the findings stated on pages 2 and 3 of the applicable report by city staff dated September 25th, 2013, as well as the testimony submitted to this commission and the commission's discussion.
Seconded.
Look at that. The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any voting? All in favor?
Aye.
You guys are on
Great.
top of me. Thanks. Congratulations. Good luck
Thank you
with
very
that.
much.
Chairman, can you repeat who seconded that motion?
Sure, I'd love
For
to
the
do
record.
that. That was, motion was made by Commissioner Ransom and seconded by, Commissioner Travers, and seconded by, let's see, I think at least 2 people. Preschlack.
Besides that,
It's not even that late, yeah.
7:20.
Is there a hockey game going on or something?
And
All right,
everybody
we got
voted
one
aye.
more here, folks. Stay with me here. We have a consideration of a request for certificate of appropriateness approving the demolition of the residence at 230 Mayflower Road and approving a replacement residence and the related landscape plan. While folks are setting up, I'll ask if anybody has a conflict on this one. And I see no conflicts, so come on up and introduce yourselves and tell us what you got.
Good evening, I'm Mike Culligan, Culligan Abraham Architecture, representing Scott and Nancy Kraft and their project at 230 North Mayflower. And just to give you a little background, When I was first contacted by Nancy to come out and take a look at her property, they had purchased this property, which you can see here on the screen. It had been vacant for some time, and she had initially contacted me and discussed doing a tear down. When I found out the location, I understood where Mayflower was and understood the context that this property was around. So I was pleasantly surprised. Sometimes when I come out and meet people and they're talking about tear downs, there's a lot of quality homes that people are looking to tear down. And knowing this neighborhood, I didn't know what to expect when I drove up. So when I came to the property to visit Scott and Nancy, drove up to this house here, I was relieved, so to speak, because it didn't seem in character kind of with the historic nature of the rest of the town. When I walked to the front door, Scott answered the door, and at that point I further understood kind of, you know, their mindset on demolishing this property, because Scott answered the door. He's 6'6". Ceiling heights on the first floor are 7 feet. So there were some peculiarities about the existing house, and having said that, though, the site was just magnificent, and within about 5 minutes we kind of walked around, and Nancy asked me, well, what do you think if we save this house and do a renovation? Kind of completely, you know, throwing me off guard in terms of what I had gone out to look at. And there were some difficulties initially kind of with that concept. One of the biggest difficulties was reusing this existing house. It has a interior courtyard, an exterior interior courtyard. If you've looked at the plans, and we can kind of see some images in the photographs here, that, you know, I think was probably the statement design move by the architect, but really created a lot of difficulties both in terms of kind of how the house is used, the interior flow of the space. If you go back to the top picture, that's the entrance hallway, and you can see the 7-foot ceilings, and the masonry. It's masonry all interior and exterior, so it got kind of a hard edge feel to it. And when I was there, it had just snowed. It was early winter, and it just, the interior courtyard, although architecturally kind of a bold move, and you can see it there from above, and I think it's approximately 30 by 30. It doesn't get a lot of light, and not a very inviting space to be in. So when we started to talk about, and one of the things that I do when discussing is a house worthy of keeping, renovating, adding on to, we look at the structure of the house. This structure of this house is excellent. The concrete foundation is oversized. It's got concrete precast plank flooring throughout. And as you can see, you've got all this masonry piers, et cetera, throughout the house. So structurally, there was a lot to work with. It was interesting, but how we were going to make things work in terms of all the code implications, the FAR, the heights, all those things that we have to adhere to, especially with the fact that we've got a large footprint because of this big hole in the middle of the house. We can't just simply fill it in and go up with the second floor, because we would be way over the allowable square footage. So as we started to kind of evaluate, well, if we save this house, what can we do? The kind of the big idea was, let's get rid of the courtyard, and that'll help us, allow us to shrink the footprint as well as the height of this, because we'll have less of a bulk to address in terms of our second floor addition. So that was the move that we kind of started to go down the path. And in terms of the look of this house, Nancy and Scott were very concerned with keeping it understated, not having a statement house, keeping the scale in context with the environment that it was in. And that was one of the kind of, I think, her motives for considering and doing a renovation to this property here, because it's certainly, working within the footprint, which is what we did, does less damage to the environment, on and on. So a lot of positives relative to that, but we still had to come back to, you know, how do we make this work? We looked at, Nancy had shown us some images of something more of a Dutch colonial. We kind of headed down that path a little bit. The mass scene, the bulk of that worked, but it was difficult. It had constraints. Roofs started to get flattened out. So then as we started to proceed a little bit further into the process, David Adler was kind of one of those role models that we looked at for this house, and it kind of used the scale and detailing that he is prevalent with his homes, specifically his residence in Libertyville, where things come down to the first floor, roofs come down. We're also talking about it's got a common brick exterior, which is you could leave it common brick. Certainly, you could paint it, or you can even wash it, and it would give it a nice historical look. So those are three of the options that we're still contemplating. Right now, we're talking about whitewashing the brick to give it kind of an old world kind of a feel to it. I'm going to have Joel from my office take us through all the plans so you can see the plans as well as the elevation overlays, and get you into a little bit further detail on some of the things that we have done. Joel?
Hello, I'm Joel Rafferty. I'm with Culligan Abraham Architecture. I'm going to run you guys through the proposed drawings, as Mike said here. Let me just get this to a full screen for you guys. I trust you kind of looked through the topography. It's a pretty flat land. It does slope off to a ravine off the back. You can see the existing circular drive and the existing structure here, and a section cut through the property. Here's the actual property line where it starts to head down the hill. As far as keeping the existing footprint, this hatched area is all of our existing, including this area here, which will be removed and become an exterior area with the existing fireplace, and allow for greater light into our center courtyard that will be the great room. This greenhouse that is kind of a glass block, half brick wall, will be removed and the brick patched and fixed. The bay window will be added in the front, and the wing walls will all be remaining as is with an addition of one on the north side. The landscape will be cleaned up. It's pretty heavy off the street line right now, so Mariani Landscaping will clean it up, and if you guys have questions, she's here to ask on that later. And tree removal plan, nothing. Some of the crab apples, I believe, will be removed, any diseased and not healthy trees. So getting to the front elevation, you can see this long linear feel of the home, low roofs and low ceiling heights in there. Pretty uninviting, pretty harsh, except for your entry area where it seems to be this void compared to the mass of the house. You can see it's pretty lopsided, pretty heavy on the north end where the only area of second floor is, and you get these single pane glasses that are pretty energy inefficient. There's little egress in the bedrooms upstairs, and these long overhangs. Proposed drawings down below, we're gonna keep a lot of that first floor brick. With the addition of the second floor, we've started to add to the center of the home to get it more proportioned, and so to say the bulk of the home in the center. The front entry is off of one of those Adler houses Mike talked about, and I'll show you a picture of that soon. But it's all glass with some columns and a solid door in the center. We started to punch some windows through here, through those existing brick walls into the garage. To keep scale down, we've turned this gable roof towards the street, and it just drops that brick down a little bit so you don't see so much. And the bay to give it some ornamentation. You can see the symmetry in of the windows to the doors below, which are carried through from existing lines of all those brick piers within the home. This is the southern elevation. You can see the existing. Again, it's pretty heavy on the back end, very towards the entry, there's just this long brick wall. And then you have these large panes of sliding glass doors into the rooms. Bank of windows into the kitchen. The greenhouse actually isn't drawn in here. And then this area is being proposed to be removed, which is currently the great room and being proposed as the kind of an outdoor area. So in replacement of that, we have a new roof with a higher pitch to match all of our other proposed pitches. We've got some slim, detailed windows, dormers into the rooms below, a kind of inset dormer into the kitchen area, and then some new pictures and casements along there. The large dormers will just be replaced. They are, big, large openings and provide a lot of light into those rooms. And then the dining room, we've proposed kind of an arched case transom over a new sliding glass door. Up to the rear elevation, you can see the kind of repetition of the sliding glass doors between these solid brick piers with the low roofs and kind of the second floor mast or balcony up there. So we've raised this roof. We've kind of brought the scale to the center, cleaned up some of these lines, and created planes, more solid planes of instead of stepping in and out as all this glass and brick does existing. So this back entry is now kind of in relation with the front entry. They speak together, and again with the lines of the existing home of all those brick piers in that center courtyard. So this is the garage side, the northern side. We're proposing to keep the garages, add some dormers for the rooms above. This whole gable here, like I said, it's turned towards the roof just to keep the scale down in relation to the neighborhood and the street appeal. Just new doors, new windows everywhere, again, painted brick. And this area is all overhanged here, as is existing in a kind of a covered back entry. So this is a section cut looking through, cut through the center of the home. You can see kind of the entry. Here's where that solid brick wall was prior. Now we have a couple punch windows. We have some large casements with transoms above for the bedroom up there. This hall is even a whole set of just picture fixed windows to allow for a lot of light into a kind of a entry area. And you can see the great room with the fireplace and a higher ceiling with bedrooms above. So this is looking towards the south. It's kind of just about the same thing here, breaking up some of those existing brick walls with some new windows. Existing footprint, foundation, not much changing. This is existing first floor plan. You can see the courtyard here that is kind of unused. There's the entry straight through the house into that where you'd have to drag all this equipment through. This is the area we're proposing to remove and become an outdoor area. These walls will be removed, the piers will be removed, the fireplace will remain. Programmatically, it will remain as is. Down here with the den, and this area is going to be kind of reworked in the kitchen den area. So you can see not much has changed. This area is removed. This area has kind of been cleaned up a little bit for a greater laundry room, mudroom. But programmatically, it's all the same. A new kitchen layout. The second floor, all on the northern edge, will now be kind of spread out a little bit. We've raised the ceiling at about 6 inches to a foot in the first floor to allow for some more height down there. And this area is all going to be vaulted in the kitchen den area below, and then a raised floor in this master suite. Or just sorry, that's just a guest suite. So we're adding one bedroom up here from where it previously was. They're all going to have en suites. Compared to prior, there was just a hall bath with 3 pretty inadequate bedroom sizes. Roof plan. You can see the overlays of the new versus the old, and just the relation of how a lot of the first floors to remain with the new punch windows and new detailing. Just to show kind of scale of the neighborhood, the house to the south is pretty set back on its property. It's not even visible from the curb. This is a 4-car garage immediately to our north. You know, you can kind of see the scale of the existing to the proposed is not much larger than what is occurring to the north of us. And then you can see from the side view as if I was looking north from our property line. This is a rendering of the kind of our proposal. You got the bay and the whole glass front here with some columns, and then just elegant detailing of these around the brick, which is some thin rake boards, thin dormer profiles, and you have the high-pitched roofs of the main house compared to the lower roofs on the dormer, and that just swoop up. We'll have some copper, and there's a flat roof here, some copper on this guy as well that's existing. Just some aerial shots of it, massing models. And that's that. I'll show you quickly I know I'm running out of time here. Show you quickly some of our some imagery of where we got some ideas here. You can see on this Adler home, just along. This is a painted brick home. This is our intentions as well. Just kind of the thin rake lines along the gable ends, which chimney. This is kind of where we got the front entry from, where it's a real kind of a void and symmetrically gridded glass large picture with this solid door with just a little bit of light in there. And we're kind of going off that, and the bay just neighboring to it. Another Adler home, our front entry has a flat roof, so our windows would be between the columns. This is all copper area up here, and this is kind of our intentions as well with against the cedar and the white brick. And this was just a close-up of a brick image, so with copper, nothing more than that. And so the cedar shake, the large shake on there, the white dormers, and just kind of gives a feel of color. I know this is a stone facade, but this bracket and the overhang is similar to what's occurring on our side entry on the garage side. And just kind of the way the windows will work, the very traditional light, pretty square proportions to them, transom above, columns in between. Back to that one. Any concluding thoughts?
Oh, we're probably over 10 minutes.
Yeah, we are. I've heard it beep a few times. So.
Thank you. Why don't you leave that model image up? Actually, the one before, yeah, maybe that one for now. Thanks.
Yeah, I printed out so it's facing the public at this point. You guys,
good.
You guys have drawings in front of you, so.
And then, Megan, if you want to give us a staff report on this one.
Thank you, Chairman Pairitz. The commission doesn't see a lot of complete demolition requests, but certainly there have been a few that come before the commission. For this particular project, given the character of the existing home, staff is really looking for input and direction on this petition to answer that threshold question of is demolition appropriate and consistent with the ordinance standards. For the Historic Preservation Commission, demolitions are reviewed looking at whether or not the structure contributes to the distinct character of Lake Forest. Is there a significance to the community, the association with an architectural style? And evaluating that, I think is important in this case because it is a unique architectural style in Lake Forest. We don't have a lot of modern contemporary structures. To that end, the petitioner has provided the commission with some documentation to support the demolition request. They have hired a third-party preservationist to evaluate the architectural integrity of the existing home and really give some context for the commission to evaluate this request. Given the intent to change the character of the home, even though the project actually reuses the footprint of the structure, this is classified as a complete demolition request. That being said, if the commission is able to support the demolition request and answer that threshold question, I would encourage you to provide some input and direction on the replacement structure to really determine if reuse of the existing footprint is the most appropriate way to create a replacement structure on this property. So I'll keep my comments brief. There was a letter from the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation at your places this evening with some comments on this request. Staff has received some inquiries from neighbors curious about the project, wanting to understand how massive a replacement structure would be, commenting that the existing structure does sit quietly in the landscape now, but no formal correspondence has been submitted from the neighboring property owners. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but we're asking that the commission provide input this evening.
I have a question. Could you explain that demolition thing again? It seems like there's quite a few walls being reused in this. At what point does this make it to demolition?
Demolitions are considered a complete demolition if more than 50% of the structure is being affected or modified, as well as if there's a significant change to the character of a structure. So essentially the intent is to eliminate the contemporary character and create a more traditional form.
A streamlined Tudor style, is it? Streamlined Tudor is the nomenclature?
Streamlined Tudor is kind of rough on that. It's Adler-esque, maybe a revival, the colonial revival of the front. But streamlined, yes, just with the thinness and delicateness of some of the detailing, including the rake board and the eaves.
Other questions for either the staff or the presenters?
I just have a question about the thought process in using the existing footprint and retaining certain outside walls. Is, you know, what's driving that?
One of the things, when we're faced with something that's kind of a borderline tear down renovation is when we've completed the design for the renovation, is it something that we would have done had we started with a blank piece of paper? I think one of the strengths of this existing house is that it's laid out in a very organized way. There's a lot of sense. There's the views to the exterior are magnificent. The rooms are all in the right spot. This plan had a lot of good things going for it. I think more than anything, it was kind of the elevations, what the house looked like that was the problem, as well as, you know, the void in the middle of the house created kind of a quirky kind of a consideration for us. In terms of keeping the structure that was there, It's well-built. It's a well-built house. There's certainly an economic aspect to it, as well as an environmental aspect to it. Our philosophy is if we can make something look as good as if we started, with a blank piece of paper while renovating it, then it's a win-win for everybody. So that was kind of our goal when she said, let's consider renovating it. It quickly started to look at the positive aspects of this house, and there's a lot of positive aspects. So we took that and kind of ran with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a question. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, at some point, you kind of realize this wasn't a renovation, though. This is considered demolition at this point.
We knew it was going to be a complete transformation. We knew we're not going to, a lot of the times when we do additions, renovations, you pay attention to what's there and you follow the lead. In this case, it's just the opposite. We're going completely away from what's there. So, it's kind of like doing a new construction to that degree. But the difficulty with a project like this is all the constraints, because all the walls are existing, we've got to conform this new look, this new house to an existing, program footprint. That was kind of
Yeah, I
the
guess
challenge.
that's my question. I think that's a conscious choice, and you don't necessarily have to. You chose to. So I think we want to try to understand that a little bit more. And I think the bottom-up process, I think I understand in terms of what motivated the current design of the house, because there's constraints that you're dealing with on the footprint, and then there's some Dutch colonial influences, it sounded like. There's some Adler components, and I guess the question is that's maybe the bottom-up constraint-based way to do it. At the same time, did you have a top-down design philosophy that took into account the character of the surrounding houses and the neighborhood, and the fact that this is in the historic district?
If this were a new house, you're saying?
No, just in general, how you approached this house. Because, what I heard you say was that this was a house that you would have created if you had a blank sheet of paper, and there's lots of reasons to use the pieces that are there. But that only, the constraint that we operate under is that it is within the context of a neighborhood and the character of the community and the town, and so it's important to have a unifying design concept and to understand the motivations. And I'm just curious to hear if you thought of it strategically more top-down about this is the kind of unifying design themes that we had for this house versus, well, we have to deal with this foundation, we have a couple things that we like, and let's just put it together. And if the design would have been different without the existing footprint, then maybe that's something to consider.
Again, I go back to the plan that generates the elevations and the look of this house. I really like the plan that we ended up with this. It kind of all the relationship of room to room seemed to make a lot of sense. I don't think I would have ended up too far off of kind of where we ended up in terms of the look, the scale. When I first approached the property, I liked the entrance. It's a U-shaped courtyard. It's kind of warm and embracing. The scale felt pretty good. Those are all things that we tried to pick up on and kind of retain when we undertook this. And whether it was a new house or starting with no footprint at all, those are things that I think really work, regardless of whether we had to work with an existing footprint or not.
Yeah, and so did you, in that process, feel like you incorporated design elements of the neighborhood and the existing houses around it?
To make I think this is very appropriate in terms of that, in terms of the wall that it was existing and project off the house into the landscape. Garden walls everywhere in Lake Forest. So I think there's aspects of this house that we took and kind of took it and went that much further with it, retained that character of it. In terms of the scale, and the detailing. When I drive around Lake Forest, to me, it's all about scale and detail when you look at these wonderful homes. And that's something that we're hoping that this project is going to have as well, and it's going to be in character with the rest of this community.
Thanks. Other questions for, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I have a question about, just a concrete design question. I'm wondering about the differences between the bay window in the family room and the windows around the front door. I feel like they just don't belong together. I feel like, you know, are we going to be more contemporary or are we going to be more traditional? You know, they just don't look like they should be next to each other. The pane size is extremely contemporary around the front door, and then the bay window in the family room just seems to not want to be next to the front door windows. Do you want to make them a little bit more, just kind of decide, are you going to be contemporary or are you going to be traditional? But, you know, right next to each other, I don't feel like they really flow.
I guess I look at, for me, we kind of mix and match some things. It's not always a strict, everything's got to be by the book, traditional. You're talking mostly about the window mullions, that type of thing,
Yeah.
the fenestration? Okay.
Yeah, just, you know, a very contemporary feel on the right side of the house, and then the little section right here with the very traditional fireplace, and, you know, it's just, they don't seem to fit to me. They don't really work well together, in my mind.
So it's interesting because I have a tendency
You're
to agree
talking-
a little bit with Mary Ellen. I'm not sure if it's the detailing or if it's the overall scale of the two elements next to each other. Adler managed to pull it off rather eloquently, so that's a tough guy to follow. But I see what she's driving at. I'm not sure it's the relationship of traditional to modern so much as just the relative sizing of the masses. So the bay window, relative to the entry, looks quite diminutive in this elevation. And I don't think it's quite the same. If you go back to that Adler example for a minute, that'd be interesting to see again after we looked at that. You can see the scale of the bay window here is quite in character with the entry. You know, it's not small relative to that entry. Matter of fact, it might even be feeling a little bigger, but it's interesting. They're very compatible. And so that may just be something that requires a little more study. You've chosen one of my favorite styles actually to emulate, so hard to pick on that. But
Can I pick on it?
Sure, please do.
Okay, great. Because I'd like to sort of backtrack, if I could. You know,
Yeah,
this is the
that's what
Historic
we're actually asking
Preservation-
questions, so-
Historic Preservation
Oh,
Commission.
Thanks, John.
And so I just wanted to
down
ask
to
some
us a little bit
questions
more.
relative to the historic work, which has been presented to us
Sure.
by the petitioner. And
Are you saying my question wasn't valid?
No, all of your guys' questions are really unbelievably fantastic. I just thought that
Forwarded.
before everything completely went to what kind of house we're going to build here, I thought that I might at least, sort of put my oar in on the issue of whether or not this building should be demolished as it sits. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I have some questions relative to that. And the questions are related to the historical, the preservationist material which was presented to us. And then I'll probably have some other comments to make when we're considering that. The first question I had is, at the beginning of the historic preservation assessment, we discussed the landmark status of the property. And it's described as not designated a local landmark by the city of Lake Forest, nor is it in a locally designated historic district. I wanted to touch base with city staff on that, because city staff indicated that the property lies within the East Lake Forest local and national register of historic district. So is it within a local historic district, staff?
This property is within the East Lake Forest Historic District.
Okay, great. Then I wanted to touch on some other topics which they address in their historic preservation assessment. This deals with whether the site is a historically significant site, and one thing that's said here is on a large suburban lot on a little traveled cul-de-sac. I would have never described Mayflower Road as a little traveled cul-de-sac, by the way. This house is neither in a unique location, nor does it offer a distinctive presence to anyone other than a few neighbors. Now, one thing I would mention, just off the bat, is that this site is a very historical site. It was the home of, well, among other things, for many years, the predecessor site, Fairholme. And when that burnt down, the lot was broken up and this house was built. And I think being located on Mayflower in a site which lies above Mayflower, with, except for some foliage, would, you know, very well be seen from and overlooks Mayflower. It is quite a unique site, so I think it's important to bear that in sight from a historical standpoint. It's a unique site from the standpoint of Lake Forest as a neighborhood and the local neighborhood, which I want to touch on. Again, I want to argue to you, and I want to hear back from you, why you think this is not a unique site. Because as I stand on this site and I look immediately south, I see one very beautiful house, which, using your vernacular, you would describe as a modern prairie house. And then I see, obviously, the anchor of this little neighborhood, which is the Glore House, the only Frank Lloyd Wright commission in the city of Lake Forest. And I'll note one thing, almost virtually everything you're saying about this house, right, you could very readily say about Glore House and decide to paint it white and, you know, make it into a streamline.
John, I think you're bringing up some really good points, but
I know.
this is
So
the
my
question.
is
Let's
to
get
you,
some questions.
I would like you to defend your thesis that this is not a unique site, because it's
Well,
critical
when,
for
when I,
what
s-
we do here.
when I first drove up to the property, I thought it was a great site. My initial response was, great site.
Okay.
So beyond that, in terms of the history of the house that was on there prior to the house that's on there now, I was not aware of that, but beautiful site.
Okay. And so do you have any comments relative to the appropriateness of changing then the nature of this building in terms of its neighborhood? That is, it's in a neighborhood of, you know, fairly important modern prairie, to use that nomenclature, houses.
Well, I think the consultant, the historical consultant, did their review and touched on this house as not being one of their better examples of this architect's works. So relative to, I mean, you start getting into subjective taste in terms of, do I like that house? Do you like that house? I mean, everybody's got a different opinion relative to that, so.
Again, also in the historical work, and so I'm focusing on the historical work, and I'm not entirely sure whether you have your historian here, your preservationist here, but he says Balfour Ames Lanza has not been identified as a significant architect by us or by anyone else we have found. And, you know, I'm not an architect, but, you know, I have a brochure which was published by the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff Historical Society describing this house. It's a pamphlet they issued. And it says, an informative history on the current home located at this address, built by the noted architect Balfour Ames Lanza. And so I'm somewhat, you know, I think that's somewhat at odds with the idea that in the historical work that your consultant did, saying that Lanza has not been identified as a significant architect by us or by anyone else. I was wondering if you could talk about that.
I really don't have a comment relative to Lanza and his role in terms of history as
So
an
if I could make a
architect.
suggestion here, the staff has not made a recommendation on this, and I think that they understand that this is a controversial enough project that the petitioner is seeking some direction here. They've done enough homework for us to comment and to give them some areas of concern where we might or might not want further study, right? And so I'm hoping that we can get through the question and answer period here so that we can then deliberate and give them some of those. I don't expect us to necessarily get to a motion on this evening, but I might be wrong about that. Because without a staff recommendation, I'm a little bit loath to support a motion one way or another, but I am keenly interested in your comments and everyone else's comments and deliberations actually too, so that we can give the petitioner some direction as to where we might want to see more information, where we might want to challenge them on their assumption of what they should do here one way or another. I think that's important. So, you know, it's not, I'm not too interested in necessarily putting them on the spot with respect to being able to answer chapter and verse on historic preservation, but certainly this is, the reason we are here is because this is not something that staff can look at and say, yep, you could do that. We know this is controversial. That's why we're here. So we should be asking these questions, and we should be telling them where we'd like to see some additional information or attention given. So is there other questions for them? Because I think the question there is, can you respond to the report? And without your historian here, maybe that the answer is that you need the historian for that.
Yeah, I feel bad because I feel like I'm browbeating them because I'm saying, this
feel-
looks,
I
it's
feel-
like
I
it's
feel
dead
like-
wrong.
I
Why
feel
don't you
like-
tell me why it's
Yeah,
not
I feel
dead
like that's
wrong?
what we're doing, and that's not
And
really.
it's just
yeah,
mean.
We're trying, I'd like it to be as helpful a process as
Yeah,
it could be.
I agree.
So, other questions or comments for folks, either on the existing home or the,
I had some questions on just, on the roof heights. I was looking at the existing and the proposed east elevations. Can you just, there's some small print. I think the new plan was at close to 29 feet. I'm not sure existing. If you could maybe just go over that, just to kind of get proportions and.
Sure. Towards
Thanks.
the back, we call out the existing height of the home. We're actually about 10 or 11 feet under our allowable. So we're calling out 29 on our new. Our allowable per the square footage of the lot is 40. And you know, just getting, we're adding a little bit of brick to the first floor just to raise those roof lines and to not make it that squatty look anymore, and to allow for plenty of space in those bedrooms above. The existing at that second floor ridge is roughly 22, 23 feet.
And did you go a little higher because of the, maybe the constraint around the existing footprint?
Square footage
Yeah.
was what, going higher was just because it does look squatty with these tall roofs, and proportionally the brick to the roof, it did need to raise. And just to eliminate that 7-foot floor ceiling height in the first floor, it had to come up. So there was no getting around that.
Yeah.
You can see the wing walls are at the existing heights, and along the north side, the left, looking at the front, there wasn't that much raise compared to the northern side of it, the right side, as all those floors or ceilings are vaulted along that whole wing.
Yeah.
you didn't happen to have pictures of the street view of this house from, as you drive by the street view of this house, really the driveway is about the only view corridor to the.
It's pretty heavily shrubs there, and
Yeah.
that's one of our proposals, to clean that up and just We do want to have a street view and not just have that 12-foot tunnel vision of this home.
So go on back to your landscape plan. I know it was quite an abbreviated discussion of that, but for example, if you could just show us that again. I think there was a site plan, actually.
I'll invite Carrie up here to answer some of those questions.
Okay. So actually, before you go to this plan, if you could go to just the existing site plan. I'm interested first in understanding the existing site a little bit better. So here, this is all, can you just describe the existing vegetation on this plan?
Sure. Right now, the border is a mix of spruce, pretty mature spruce, that we want to retain. There's also a mix of, there's some buckthorn and honeysuckle and all kinds of stuff.
Go on back to your plan, your new plan, because it's not shown here, so maybe you can kind of, thanks.
So the whole perimeter, the mixed perimeter, we really want to retain. The border planting as it is, we want to eliminate things that are diseased or dead or haven't been maintained, obviously. But we do want the perimeter planting to remain much as it is today. We feel that you need that transition to the mature size of the trees. You need that. The only trees we're proposing removing are crab apples that are closer to the house. There is an old river birch, and there's one ash that already came down that was diseased.
So just from the street view, and frankly, maybe from the surrounding home views, you would describe what they're going to see from a vegetation point of view is pretty much what's there.
It's going to be fairly similar. We're going to actually add some shrubbery into that where it's gotten a little leggy. We do want to, from the street view, the largest change is there's a crab apple that's in the center of the existing driveway. That is being proposed to be removed, that crab apple. But besides that, the street view wouldn't change.
Got it. Other questions to either the staff or petitioner?
Yeah, well, as much as I regret seeing this house have to be changed, because I think will be a loss to the community. We don't have many examples like this in town. I understand that making this much revision to it would probably make it, the original one, unrecognizable anyway, so it would be lost by virtue of being significantly modified. But getting back to the proposed elevations, I'm a little confused by for instance, on the south elevation, it looks like you're retaining or duplicating the sliders as they were, kind of, which doesn't seem like it goes with the rest of the house very much. And I'm a little also puzzled by the elliptical transoms, which don't seem to relate to anything either. And on the south elevation, what are these little dotted windows next to the recessed one? What does that represent?
Those are actually from that center bedroom. They look into the kitchen.
So they're on the other side.
That's all interior windows, and they won't be seen from the elevation at all. As far as the transoms, it was kind of, we have these large expanses of openings between these existing brick piers. And to break up this repetition of our proposed kind of center rear entry, we looked at many different proposals of what to fill in here, whether we just more and more brick, make them more solid, or kind of semi-retain their existing character, but also break away from the repetition of this grid with all these windows. So this elevation would just keep continuing, and as it sticks out from the house, it is kind of this new element that's occurring with this copper roof, and just creates a new character within this dining room to the house, and just is if it's,
Why did you choose to go mutton-free on those openings?
it's, that side of the house is, it's kind of not visible from, as you standing at the front entry, you can see straight through to the, this side with all the mutton. So it kind of relates to each other, where this kitchen, dining room, den area, are kind of a separate wing of the home, so to say. You don't see through as much. And it just is a different effect we're looking for. Larger panes of glass to look out to the yards.
So now I'm going to, John will like this.
Can I ask a
I'm
question?
going to, sure, but I'd like to direct the commission to think about, now that we've kind of had a chance to ask questions. There's a lot of detailed nuances to this proposed house that I think we could pick on and that we could ask you a lot of questions about. But I would like to focus back on the big picture for a moment, if we can, on the Q&A, because I think that we could get mired in that, and I don't, I wanted to give it enough time so that people could talk about it. But I'm interested in getting some public comments here, and then I am interested in getting to deliberations, because I think we have some qualitative remarks for you that are important. So, but I'd like to follow the form work of the meeting.
Could I ask one
Sure,
question
please
of
do.
them, which is more along what
Yep.
you guys are
Yep.
thinking about,
Yeah.
like, okay, why is what they're going to do
Yeah.
what they're going to do?
Sure.
So obviously, the brick used here, the pink or orange, or rose, Chicago common brick, I mean, is just so, well, I mean, I don't have to tell you. I mean, it's just so iconic for houses of this sort. When you look down the road a little piece and you're looking at the Glore House, you're seeing that reverberating back and forth across the way. Why do you want to paint it white?
Well, it gets down to when you are starting to add new courses on top and starting to match a lot of the grout and matching that common brick itself. As many varieties as there is, it's in all those hues that you're talking about. It's just something that you have to have it dead on to make it look good, otherwise it looks bad. So, and it's just...
So matching the brick
is
impossible, and so therefore you need to paint it to hide it.
And it's also, a want from our client as well. The white brick is, you get your list of wants, and that was it. So.
I mean, did you talk to them at all about this material and its role in Chicago architecture? Have you played an educational role in this?
She's well aware of the Chicago common brick, and as we all are. So, but it's it's
Well,
a
I
very
mean,
I'm sorry.
harsh material at the same time.
I'm out of sync again.
No, I think it's fine, I mean, but it's, I think the question was asked.
It's answered.
And then some.
Asked and answered. That's what you should
All
tell
right,
people.
so I'm going to ask if there's any public comment at this time and give you guys a break from standing up and see. I noticed that there are a few, so come on up one at a time, introduce yourselves, and let's hear your public comments.
Hi, I'm Jan Gibson again, 59 East Franklin Place. I invite everybody to read last week's Lake Forester, where a family or a couple bought a modern house and they weren't quite sure of it, and then they fell in love with it, and we gave them an award for preserving it. It's a good article, and I think we might read it before tomorrow's issue comes out. Right now, I don't personally think that there's a justification for tear down, and the reason for this is that in 5 years, this house will be a contributing structure in the district. In fact, they could probably apply to have it put on the National Register and invite me over and charge me to come in and take a look at it, because I love to be in Baulanza's homes. I've been in several in town, and I always feel as if I'm in the forest, because Baulanza created a presence. He had the land. he fit the house to the landscape. He got the landscape, and then he said, this house fits. And in each one of his houses, when you're in them, there's light that comes in, you have the forest, you have everything else. And perhaps if they need more space, whatever, they might add to the back end, or whatever end they might do something with. But he had a style, and it's lovely to be in his homes. The other thing is, and I mentioned, the word white has come up. One of the nice things about driving past the house is that you really don't see it, and I think that I have a house that you can't see from the street, and I love that privacy. And the color fits in with the forest and the whatever the season is at the time. So to make it white and change it dramatically really might not be the best for the neighborhood. And also Lake Forest, as our preservation letter said, is really a mix of houses. And that's special to our community. And anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? You can fight it out.
Run.
My name is Charrington Drake. I live at 255 Mayflower Road. I'm in an historic home, probably Shaw's first house. I was built in 1897, and I had the esteemed privilege of putting it back together after it had been transformed into a modern house, or tried to be transformed into a modern house. It had been empty for 6 years, and I love everything about it. And yes, is it perfect? No. Was it perfect when it was designed? I think it was. Is it perfect for today's modern family or whatever? No, but you work with it. So the first question I had when I looked at my house was, why did they even bother buying it if they really didn't want a traditional home? They tried to make it, again, a modern home. So my question is, on this home, why would you buy a home that's so different from what you want? You know, just to say that you're going to use the footprint of it really is not sort of in keeping with, I think, what needs to be done. So the scary things for me about reading through the information that I picked up was steep, elongated, streamlined, modern, white, Tudor. Those are all kind of scary to me. I'm across the street and just south a little bit of this home. This home is nestled. It's inconspicuous. It has a beautiful brick to it. It is in keeping with the interest in the neighborhood architecturally. It's traditional in certain ways, and it's a positive house to have there. Now, is the landscaping beautiful in front? No. Has it been empty for quite some time? Yes. Does it need a little bit of help in that direction? Yes, it does. Does it need to be torn down? I hope not, but if in fact they are going to keep, for the little bit, they're keeping the footprint, from what I can understand, I'm not an architect, but from what I can understand, they want to keep the footprint. If in order to deal with the existing brick, which from what I can gather from the pictures, there isn't that much existing brick that's going to be left because they're going to increase it height-wise, why not just get rid of the brick and start with something that's much more, material that's much more in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood? Because if you're only painting the whole house white in order to match, or not being able to match with, you know, probably 30 square feet of brick, then why bother? Just take the brick down too and go to something that's much more natural that'll blend in with the landscape. For me, you know, obviously it's a personal thing. I would love not to have to drive out my driveway and see this big white home in front of me, where right now is, as I said, something very quiet and quiet. And I think it's an interesting home, but again, that's all my 2 cents worth. Other words in here that scared me was about describing that house was it was a mismatch, it was obsolete, it was a mashup, it was. It had no character, and I think there's quite a bit to that home, and I'm hoping that this commission will really look into this, especially the height, especially the color, the materials. The windows, I think, are, you've got, again, as you pointed out, a combination of all kinds of windows, and there isn't any consistency, and when you get something that's good, consistency is good. If you have something that's not so good, consistency is not so great. But again, I hope you all really, really think about this, because it's going to have a big effect on our neighborhood. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And I think there was one more. Come on up, Rami.
Two more.
Oh, two more maybe. Dude, Mike, keep going.
Good evening. My name is Rami Lopet, and I live at 410 East Woodland Road. I was channel surfing. I don't know what I was looking for, but I landed on you. And I came across this cold, had not seen this proposal, and saw the new house and heard it described as Adler-esque, and started levitating out of my chair. I think that's doing a big disservice to Mr. Adler, but I'm actually not here to comment on the new house, but to encourage you, the HPC, and to encourage the staff, to encourage this architect, to encourage the homeowner, I might even say beg, to appreciate the contemporary architecture of Lanza and the setting in which this house is. And I now know that this is within 5 years of becoming a contributing structure to the East Lake Forest Historic District. Very important. And the house to compare, I love the house. I've driven down Mayflower many a time and admired this house. The house to compare it to, you're absolutely right, is the Glore House. And when I was watching the TV show and heard about these low ceilings, I thought, my God, I've been in the Glore House. If the entry to the Glore House is 6 foot, I would be surprised. It's very low. My husband's 6'6", so he can't fit in the entry, but he didn't mind crawling through because it opened out into the great glass that looked out into that ravine and into that natural setting, which is exactly what you've heard tonight, that this house is nestled into a natural setting, and it's all about the landscape. It just has to be, and in the interior courtyard as well. Just the other night, in this very room, we heard at length about the importance of the interior courtyard on the Krebs house, the Italian villa on Ringwood, and how important that interior courtyard is to that kind of that bringing nature into the house, into the home. So with that, I think that I would like to say that I hope you will help figure out a way to preserve this house, to improve this house. Adler had lesser homes, he had finer homes, and when it comes to our work on them, we have to preserve them and improve them, but not tear them down. Thank you.
Thank you. One more. Come on up.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sanjay Gandhi. Our family lives directly south of this house at 210 North Mayflower Road. Nice to meet you. We've not met our neighbors as of yet, and that's one concern I have is in considering this plan and this proposal, it would be interesting to at least work with the neighbors, both ourselves as well as the Beidlers who are in the Glore House and the neighbors to the north, to see what kind of impact it would truly have on this community. Because while there are a number of people who drive very fast down Mayflower Road, and there are a number of joggers who use Mayflower Road, these houses, as well as across the street, are the members of the community who are truly going to be impacted by this home. I can appreciate the petitioner's desire to change this home. I've been in this home a number of times when it was on the market, wondering if this home would be something for my family back when it was on the market at the same time we purchased our home. I think we live in Chicago. When we talk about architecture in Chicago, it's all about trying to modify structures to be used for contemporary use. I love our home, but every day there are challenges that we face with the way it is designed and the way it's laid out. And I think that you all have a challenge here. I think that this home needs to be modified. It needs to be brought up to a structure that can be used today. And I think there are some amazing design elements to it. But I wonder whether we should be changing the fundamental character of this home and this area. That is something for you all to guide us on. And of course, once that guidance is provided, then of course some of the details need to also be considered. I would challenge you to look at the all of the different sides of this home. I would say to you that the west elevation is important. My kitchen looks out on it. I think the south elevation is important because if you want to truly appreciate that elevation, please go to, forgotten their address, I think it's 170, to the Glore House, stand in their driveway and look at north, and you'll get an appreciation for the importance of that elevation. And I also think that, of course, the east elevation is extremely important because as you drive by, you have a certain perspective that gives you an appreciation for contemporary architecture, this little mini enclave within Lake Forest that's filled with Adler homes and other wonderful architects, but that are very, very different from this area. So that's all I have to say. I do invite the petitioners to stop by our home anytime, any questions they have, any concerns. Right now we're dealing with the ash borer on this property line between our two homes. And that also, I think, is something that will have to be considered as we move forward.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? All right, and I see none, so it's an opportunity to deliberate, and I invite you to do so. Any comments from the commissioners? So there's a high bar for demolition in this community, and I think that you know, we started off on picking on details of the new design. We're kind of apt to do that. We like doing that. We start with dormers usually. Your dormers are pretty good.
I know.
You know, but
You guys love 'em.
it doesn't mean that we are that we're jumping directly to that, and I wouldn't want to encourage that. So I would say that in general, there's probably more questions with respect to the historic review that we would love to have an opportunity to talk to the person that prepared that. And I think that would be, you know, we're used to seeing having that opportunity on a demolition of a structure that is at least questionably noteworthy, if not completely noteworthy. And I think there's enough basis here for us to be interested in having that conversation, or at least maybe even sending some questions specifically to staff if we have them. And I think that there probably would be some that we could do that as a result of this meeting if folks are interested in doing that. With respect to, you know, that covers a lot of territory. The other thing is that this landed on my doorstep Friday afternoon and with no other notice, and I know that that's probably the same for all the commissioners. So I've never been inside of this house. I know this house from the driveway and from the printed materials. So that's not enough information for me to support a demolition, but I'm also cognizant that there's a case for this to perhaps be demolished, and I'm sensitive to that. We do a lot of qualitative decision-making here, and I think that you know, we need to know all the facts to do that. And including, you know, and I think that sets a high bar for the replacement structure. So sometimes we jump to that because it's easy to pick on that. It's a lot harder to get to through the qualitative discussion of whether this is a house that we would want to lose or not. So
it kind of reminds me of that house on Westminster.
Yeah.
You know, by the church that was like 2 or 3 years ago. That was a Stanley Anderson, and it was, you know, kind of positioned as not one of its greatest works. And and we walked through the criteria pretty, kind of rigorously. And I think the onus is on the replacement structure. This is a nicer structure, and it's more integrated, I think, even though there was pods of Anderson homes in there, that if you go by it, it's kind of a rural contemporary setting between the Gandhis and the Bylers in this house. And, it is, if someone loved a contemporary architecture, they'd be thrilled to be in it.
Yeah.
They could live it, it's usable. But I also am sensitive to the case. I just don't think we need to make the demolition case
Yeah.
for them.
That's
I
right.
think the petitioners really, here's my feedback. My feedback is, it seems like a design that was done on a Lanza foundation with elements of Adler from another town, and there's some Dutch colonial influences, but there's no unifying theme and continuity to the neighborhood or the town. And sometimes people get that by hiring people that are familiar with the town and the neighborhood and put an emphasis on that. We just saw a petitioner today who swapped out the architect and hired Austin DePree and came up with a solution. And I'm not saying that needs to happen, but to me, there needs to be a lead architect. The church is another good example. I had to recuse myself, but it was a project that was serviceable, and there's a utility to it. I think there's a utility to this home. It's, you can argue about the types of windows and things, but the church missed the broader perspective of the context in the community, and then somebody else came in with a fresh pair of eyes and said, oh, why don't we put a wall here, and why don't we do this, and we can create the same solution a little bit more elegantly. And maybe there's a way to leverage the existing foundation for this home, but this isn't it, in my mind. And I'd be just as happy to say, really do a blank piece of paper and come back with a Lanza-esque design or an Adler design that does fit in with the landscape and the neighborhood. I don't think they need to be tied to the footprint, and I'd probably be more open to bulk issues if they operated outside of that constraint and put something together that was more thoughtful.
Obviously we have two questions here. First, the demolition, and second, the replacement structure. And they're two independent issues, and we're trying to give the petitioner our thoughts on both those things. So I'm going to go a little bit backwards. As far as the replacement structure, I was, and Kurt, our chairman, has mentioned this many times, that it's kind of hard to get a sense sometimes, of what the actual structure looks like with these flat 2D drawings. But my sense of it is, to me, it was very confused with competing, roof heights and openings and things like that. Different types of windows in different spots, and just in the front, there seems to be more solids, on one wing, and and different window openings on another part of it. So I was very confused by the replacement structure, and maybe it was just because it was drawn in two dimensions. As far as the the demolition request, the city has specific criteria that we're supposed to look at, and the staff, put it in their staff report, and I keep on referring back to it as I heard the presentations this evening, and I think this is a really close call. We have, allowed demolition of structures by significant architects like Anderson, who are recognized. And, I'm not saying Lanza isn't significant. And, I know that the foundation has put out this brochure about him, or about this property. And the petitioners expert did refer to that in their report, so took note of that, and I know there's different examples of lands of property around the city already, so, it's really a close call, and when it becomes a close call, it's on the petitioner really to convince me that, that the demolition criteria is met. And so I want to echo what, John was saying and Kurt was saying, that, oftentimes when that's the case, talking to your expert on the historic preservation or letting us question or at least hear their report, is sometimes very important to getting to that conclusion. So those are just my comments on it.
All right. Any other deliberations that we'd like to leave the petitioner with this evening?
I have some, if I may.
Sure,
And
please.
I'll try not to pull a Ted Cruz here.
Actually, go for it.
So as I read this material very carefully before coming here, and I visited the site, and I agree with you, I would love to have gone inside, but I was really afraid of those little dogs in there. They were very
Boston Terriers?
very active, and they didn't like my looks at all. But really, as I completed my work at home and after inspecting it, I decided that what I wanted to do here today with this, given that I'm not an architect, even though I play one on TV, is I wanted to address in a very specific way the work of their historic preservation consultant. And frankly, my point of view was I wanted to impeach him because I believe that actually his work doesn't stand up to the sniff test of what someone who's interested in historic preservation can ascertain in a reasonably short period of time. And so I'll come back to that when I'll give my recommendations on this. But I think the following should be taken into account in considering the issue of demolition, which is where my focus is. Again, contrary to their consultant, the property does lie within the East Lake Forest local and national historic districts. Contrary to what their consultant says, the site is a historically significant site on a premier residential street of Lake Forest. And frankly, if the removal of screening vegetation was deemed desirable by the owner, the situation of the home is such that it would overlook Mayflower Road as well as the beautiful modern prairie homes to the south. And could be well viewed from that prestigious residential street and from those very complimentary homes in that small neighborhood. The home, contrary to what their consultant says, was designed by a noted and well-respected Lake Forest architect, active in the post-war period, who is considered of historical importance by Lake Forest residents who care about these things. The home itself is considered of historical importance by Lake Forest residents. To sort of pull a Jeff Foxworthy, if the Lake Forest Historical Society publishes a pamphlet about your home, it just may be historic. The home forms part of a historically interesting, and I think this is just absolutely does not come through at all. The Glore House is not even mentioned in their preservationist work. The home forms part of a historically interesting small neighborhood of modern prairie homes, to use their nomenclature, whose design draws on the Wrightian design vernacular and is anchored by the home's near neighbor, the Glore House, reportedly the only Frank Lloyd Wright commission in Lake Forest. And this small cluster of homes forms an attractive south view from the site, and as someone pointed out, if you drive into the Beidler's residence, you can get a beautiful view heading then to the north. The home is in very good condition and appears to be in every respect well suited for continued habitation. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I want to tell you a story that I think applies very directly. So quite a number of years ago, the Glore House was up for sale. And it just so happened that it was feasible. And so my wife Carrie and I went out to look at that house. It had, believe it or not, Kurt, I'm actually interested in architecture. And so it was a dream of mine to live in a Frank Lloyd Wright house. So I went into the house with Carrie. We went the first time, we went the second time, and we went the third time. And we just realized that we could not figure out how to live in this house. We just couldn't figure out how to live in it. How would we live in this house? We couldn't figure it out. So sometime later, the house was sold to the Beidlers, the young Beidlers, an architect family, of course. And I discovered how you could live in that house very graciously. And I wasn't able to figure that out, but they were able to figure it out. And I just think, as I think back to what people are saying about this house in terms of its functionality, you could say the same about the Glore house, and you could say, well, you know, I'm 6 foot. Yeah, well, I'm not 6 foot, so my son's 6'3", and you know, so he's feeling a little nervous about that, and you know, we're going to change some things, so we're going to take that beautiful brick and paint it, you know, pink or whatever you're going to paint it. You could say all those things about that house, and I don't think that makes it right. I think that sometimes people should figure out how to live in these important houses. I know that's easy for me to say. We made a decision. We bought a house that's much less aesthetic, on a much less beautiful lot, but which, with our limited imaginations, we could figure out how to live in. So in closing, what I would like to say, may I mention one other thing? So when we're thinking about this architect and how others may view this architect, one thing we might want to keep in mind is that the very close companion to this house is lived in by our Professor Fred Moyer, who recently left us in my neighborhood. And I believe these houses are well regarded, you know, from what I read in historical publications, what I read in periodicals, and I believe that they are in fact historic, and that in a certain sense, the work of their historic preservationist consultant is impeached, and we should consider, in terms of giving guidance to the petitioner, we should consider asking them to engage a historic preservation consultant who is more familiar with Lake Forest. And I think that would be very helpful to the process. Those are my comments.
All right. Any other deliberations from folks?
I just would like to go back and quickly clarify the house in Westminster, the Stanley Anderson, that we voted to tear down. We only voted to tear it down because it was already half torn down. The interior had been totally demolished, the roof was off, it had been exposed to the elements for 8 months.
Yes,
and it
I
had
think
been
that's
abandoned. So I think I just don't
agree
want
with you. I
everybody
think-
listening to think that we
Yeah.
tore down a Stanley Anderson. It had already been 80% demolished and
Yeah,
was
it's quite a
falling apart.
different, quite a different
So-
set of circumstances, and replaced with in a very, very sympathetic character home. So I think that's probably not a great. But I'm with you, Jim, in terms of it did bring it to mind. But I agree,
But
it
I
was
just don't
different
want, you know,
circumstances.
everyone to listen
Yeah.
here that we tore down a Stanley.
Yeah, different
Well,
circumstances.
we did tear one down, it just was the interior was gutted.
Yeah, the
And
roof
the
was
outside
gone
was
and-
compromised, but yeah, I mean, there's no house
Right.
the same.
We're
But
not
it
really
was- It was a
debating that again,
contentious
are we?
discussion.
But it's not like we took a beautiful, perfect intact and said,
We
you
have
know,
enough
go,
time. We have enough
goodbye,
time
you
staying
know.
on
Well, yeah, I didn't say that.
We do. All right, well, I think we've done our best, I think, to highlight the challenges here for you. I certainly don't disparage the architect's attempt on this. I think that, you know, there's lots of factors that you weigh when you propose something. I think the economic is certainly something that you can't help but evaluate, and of course the direction from your client as well. But given the background that what we've talked about, I'm hoping that we've given you enough
You
to
wanna
think
hear from
about
Rob?
that. What's that?
You haven't
Oh,
commented, do you want to say anything?
Well, I should say, coming from a position of having known Ballanza personally and having seen his work over the years, and it's, yeah, it's very hard to see, see it not being preserved. I don't know if there was any attempt to look at being able to change this within that vernacular or not, or whether it was just a decision that that style wasn't liked and they automatically went to something else. But I think at least it would be worth that examination.
Thanks. I would take a motion to table this one, if there is such a motion.
I move that we table the.
All right, so continue, I guess, is the motion.
Oh, I was hoping to table it.
Either
I
way.
move that we continue this.
All right, so the motion's been made by Commissioner Travers. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Swenson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So we've continued the motion, and I'm hopeful that you'll give it some thought and certainly consult with staff. We'll be happy to try to have follow-up questions and answers if the staff directs any to us. We could do that, but I think that they get the gist of our concerns. Is there any, this is an opportunity for the public to come up with any other non-agenda items, if we have any, and I see none, so I will ask if the staff has any other additional information for us, and I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion has been made
Seconded.
by Commissioner Alfe and seconded by Commissioner Preschlack. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.